Greetings. My name is Letitia Hensley, and I'm the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools Director of Family and Community Engagement. We are excited that you are joining us today and know you will gain great insight from this session. At the conclusion of today's session, please provide feedback so that we can continue to support you with amazing sessions that will be provided throughout the year. Now, without further ado, we'll turn it over to our presenters.
So hi, today welcome to the CMS Family Academy, understanding MTSS and my role as a parent within the framework. So in the Q&A, you will see a bit.ly to this presentation today. All right, let's go over a few housekeeping things today to help with your interaction. So in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see the captions button. If you click that icon, you're going to get a drop down that says show live captions. When you click on that, you're going to get another drop down for you to be able to choose the language of your choice. This will help translate the words that I'm saying if you need language support. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to go ahead and do that. So again, in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to click captions, then click show live captions, and then choose the language of your choice. Okay. Next, we're going to show how to engage. So again, in your top right-hand corner, you're going to see an icon that says Q&A. So if you click on that Q&A icon, you're going to be able to ask a question in the Q&A. The questions will be monitored. We will definitely have Q&A time at the end of this presentation, and then we're going to have a frequently asked questions documented that will be updated and shared with the video recording. Feel free to also share your reactions during the presentation as you see fit. So we have a reactions button as well at the top right-hand corner. So go ahead and just give me some reactions on how you're feeling right now. All right, thank you. So we would love to hear from you. We always want to hear feedback. Feedback is a gift and we appreciate it. So in the Q&A, we have dropped the feedback bit.ly for you to use to provide us with some feedback on today's presentation. So we're going to, this is our agenda for today. We're going to have our welcome. We've already done that. Have a small opener. We're going to talk about what is MTSS. We're going to talk about MTSS and multiple tiers of instruction, MTSS interventions, how to support your child, and at-home supports. So the purpose of this PD is parents will learn about the multi-tiered system of support, MTSS framework, and how their child is supported within this framework. Parents will also learn about what resources are available for at-home support for their children and learn how to advocate for their child. So just give you a few of our staff members here in CMS that supports the framework. In CMS, we have our director, CMS MTSS director, Chantelia Guy. And then we have 4 MTSS specialists. We have Dr. Allison Gunter, Anasia Turner, Securia Lawler, that's me, and Dr. Sony Anderson. So let's get started with our opener. And our opener today is good things. So take 1 minute, about 60 seconds, to think about a good thing that's happening in your life right now. Just keep it short, real brief, but what's one good thing that's happening with you right now? It could be personal, professional. And then Once you think about that good thing, we're going to take 1 minute to write that good thing that you thought about into the Q&A, but don't hit send. So when I say go ahead and hit send with your good thing in the Q&A. All right. Do you all see in the Q&A you have say share a good thing? All right. Thank you. So we're going to get into what is MTSS. So MTSS is a multi-tiered framework which promotes school improvement through engaging, research-based, academic, and behavioral social emotional practices. So MTSS is everything that we do in school. It is for all students and supports all students. In North Carolina, MTSS is a school improvement framework that encompasses academic, behavioral, social, and emotional instruction and support. North Carolina's MTSS employs a systems approach using data driven problem solving to maximize growth for all. So, in this graphic, we have our MTSS umbrella, and it includes everything we do in the school. So, it's just not for certain students, it is for all students. There are 6 critical components of MTSS. We have leadership, building capacity and infrastructure, communication and collaboration, problem solving process, multiple tiers of instruction and intervention, and data evaluations. These components guide the states and districts' work with the MTSS framework. So now let's talk about multiple tiers of instruction within the MTSS framework. So the MTSS frameworks provide 3 levels of layered instructional behavior and SEL support for students. The first layer is core or tier 1. Tier 1 is for all students. All students will be provided with core instruction. Within core instruction, students will make progress towards standards or meeting grade level expectations. All students will receive core instruction in academic, behavior, and social emotional practices based on the needs of the district and school populations. When groups of students or individuals are not making progress, the school's MTSS team will meet to review curriculum, instruction, and environment to consider what changes are necessary to meet the needs of all students. School MTSS teams may find that adjustments and differentiation may be needed to make core instruction to support some of the students not meeting grade level expectations. So the second layer of support within the MTSS framework is supplemental or tier 2. Tier 2 is for some students. This support is in addition to and layered with core instruction. And then the third level of support or layer of support is intensive or tier 3. Tier 3 is for a few students who fall well below grade level expectation. This support is in addition to and layered with core instructions. All layers of support, differentiated core, supplemental, or intensive, is based on the MTSS team's review of multiple data sources. So when we look at these multiple tiers of support, what does it look like in a classroom? Particularly, we're talking about academic support. Teachers provide differentiated core instruction to the whole class. Again, we're talking about all students using evidence-based supports, and this includes differentiated small groups. When we're talking about tier 2 layered support for some students, teachers provide differentiated core instruction to the whole class, plus an additional targeted high efficient strategic support using small group interventions. And again, this is some students. And then when we get to tier 3, teachers again are providing differentiated core instruction to the whole class, plus intensive support, sometimes provided in one-to-one settings to only a few students. So let's talk about what are MTSS interventions. You may have heard that you should have, if your child is receiving interventions, received a letter. So let's talk about what are MTSS interventions. This is specifically um, when your child's receiving interventions for behavior, academics, SEL, or attendance. This is what you should receive at home. So again, a team makes a decision based on the review of multiple data sources. So it's not just one data source that is determining whether or not a student should receive academic, behavior, attendance, SEL interventions. There is a required parent letter that should come home. This is for supplemental, that will have the intervention, the duration of the intervention, and the frequency. So when we say duration, that means how long the intervention lasts, and the frequency, how many days a week is this student receiving this support. There should also be progress monitoring that comes along with that intervention, and those progress monitorings will be in increments of maybe bi-weekly or once a month. And for supplemental, it's small group. So it's no more than 12, should be no more than 12 students in that group as your child is receiving supplemental interventions. And then this is also, as we stated earlier, in addition to core instruction. And as a parent, you may request a meeting to discuss your child's supplemental interventions. If you have a child that has been recommended for intensive or tier 3 support or interventions, again, it's a team decision based on reviewing multiple data sources. There is a parent letter that goes home as well, but with the parent letter for intensive, there is a meeting date and time, and this is required. So the school should be reaching out to you saying, okay, would you like getting a date and time that you can meet for this intensive meeting? This meeting can be virtual. This meeting can be over the phone, or this meeting can be in person. Again, this letter should tell you what the intervention is, the duration, how long the intervention is, and the frequency, how many times a week will your child be receiving this intervention. This intervention should be progress monitored. And typically, this intervention is given in a one-to-one setting or a setting with a group no more than 5. It is also, in addition, as we stated multiple times already, to core instruction. And as a parent, you should be having a review meeting about every 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, to see how your child is doing with interventions. And that is also required. So, how can you support your child? So, we know parents play a critical role in supporting what their child is learning in school. Research shows that more parents are involved in student learning, the higher the student achievement. There are many ways parents can support what their child is doing in school, and here's a few. Make reading an everyday habit at home. Some of the things you can do, and I know even if you have a child in middle school, You can require 30 minutes of reading for your child in any grade level. In your lower grades, you may have those sight words you're using in kindergarten and first grade, but requiring 30 minutes of reading, requesting that books get sent home, that from the novel sets in the classroom, that you can support your child with reading. Communicate with your child's teacher regularly. I know we're more digitized now and we can log on to Power School and see everything, but I would say, checking your child's progress about every 2 weeks. We know progress reports go home every 4 weeks, not waiting to progress report time to get an update on how your child is doing. Any concerns you have with your child, if you think they're not meeting certain milestones academically or behaviorally, having those conversations with your child's teacher about what's going on in the classroom, what are you seeing at home, and how you can support. Monitor and assist with homework assignments. Again, in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, we give homework every day. And so with that, if your child comes home and says, I don't have work, that does homework, that does happen periodically, but it's definitely not an everyday thing. So monitoring their homework assignments, again, checking Power School. I know in elementary schools, they have those folders that they have at the end of the day and their agenda books to see what homework does my child have, and then assisting where you can. And they're asking the teacher for support, how you providing feedback. I was assisting my child with this homework. They didn't understand it. We went back in the notes. I couldn't help them with it. Can you provide my child with some support with this? Ask for regular monitoring reports. There is on the CMS website, and I don't know exactly where it is. It should be under calendars. It gives you when report cards should go out and when progress reports should go out as well. So you should be getting the progress reports around the fourth week from the start of every quarter to see how your child is doing. But also, if your child is on receiving any type of tier 2 or tier 3 interventions, whether it's academic, behavioral, or attendance, you can request progress monitoring reports for those interventions as well. And then share your child's successes. If you see improvements at home, encourage your child, tell them they're doing a good job. When they are doing a good job, provide that positive, constructive feedback to them. Learn more about the curricula and interventions being used at your child's school. One of the things, like for K-8, the math curriculum that's being used is called Open Up, and that's actually a resource that you can find online to learn more about that. For K-8 as well, they're using the L curriculum in literacy. So again, reaching out, learning more about the curriculum, what parent supports are in there to support your child with the curriculum your child is using in school. And then attend parent-teacher conferences and other school meetings about your child. So when parent-teacher conferences, you have a right to attend in person, virtually, or over the phone. So even if you can't be there in person, we do have those other two options as well for your parent-teacher conferences, responding to letters that go home, or returning phone calls, or reaching out to your child's school or teachers in Parent Square as well. So these are some questions you can ask as a parent to learn more about how MTSS works in your child's school. One, how is my child being supported within the MTSS framework? So again, every school has an MTSS leadership team, and then they have academic and behavior teams as well. Asking how your child is being supported academically, behaviorally, socially, emotionally, and with attendance as well within the MTSS framework, and specifically asking how is your child being supported at the core level. Some of the things you should hear back is they're talking about the core curriculums, which I shared earlier in reading and math, which will be open up for math, the L curriculum for reading. Again, your child should know, or the school should be able to tell you about the core behavior matrix. And this is just how behavior happens in school, the expectations of how students should act in the hallway, in the cafeteria, in the classroom, and things of that nature. So again, asking those questions about how is your child being supported, particularly at core as well. Again, we said this earlier, what curriculum is being taught in my child's classroom? Then how is my child being supported in core instruction? Um, is the classroom environment conducive for the learning of your child? Is the curriculum accessible for your child? How is your child being supported? Is your child more of a visual learner or auditory learner or kinesthetic learner, a learner that needs to feel and have activities and things to do? Or some children are a combination of all of these. How is the core being differentiated to support your child's learning and being able to access grade level expectations? And then what are the targeted interventions that my child's school is using if he or she is struggling in the classroom? So some of the interventions you may hear schools say when you ask this question at elementary, you may hear them say Orton Gillingham, which supports kids with learning to read. You may hear iReady, which supports kids with reading comprehension on the reading level. You'll hear Dreambox at the elementary level for math, which supports kids with learning early numeracy support, as well as learning those facts and being able to reason as well. At the middle school level, you'll hear about iReady again for reading comprehension. You'll hear about Achieve the Core. You also, for students that are struggling, that may have missed those early literacy skills, you will hear about Orton Gillingham. And you will also hear about Dreambox as well and Khan Academy to support in math. So what are the targeted interventions that my child's school is using if he or she is struggling with behavior, attendance, or SEL? What curriculum is being taught in my child's classroom? So again, this particular question is not just covering academics, but we're talking about behavior as well. How is my child being supported if they're struggling with behavior with interventions? You may hear something that said that a lot of schools use called check in, check out. Um, Most of our behavior interventions do need parent permission. So if someone contacts you about a behavior intervention, you would need to give them consent to be able to put your child on most of the behavior interventions in CMS. Again, with attendance, if you need support with your child getting to school on time or coming to school, the school can provide you with some support with that. Not necessarily transportation wise, but actually with the child, particularly in the upper grade levels, we're talking middle and high school, with their framework and their mindset around coming to school and the importance of coming to school. What are the formal guidelines my child's school is using for progress monitoring? So again, how is my child being progress monitored if they are on academic interventions? If a child is typically, if they're getting academically intervened, we do use DIBELS in this for progress monitoring for K3 reading. How's my child being progress monitoring with that? And how do I access the data? How do I look at the reports? Are the reports being sent home to me? Again, if your child is receiving behavior interventions, what is the progress monitoring looking like for that? How is my child progressing? Is my child meeting their goals with progress monitoring? Another question is, how will I be informed of the progress my child is making? Again, asking those questions. I stated earlier, for intensive students, you are to receive a letter along with a meeting date and time before interventions start. So that's one of the ways. And then about 5 to 6 weeks through interventions, you should receive a review meeting to talk about how your child is doing with interventions and progress monitoring. For supplemental interventions, you as a parent can request that information, that a meeting with the teacher, with the team to look at the data and see how your child is doing. But you should also receive a parent letter about what interventions your child is on as well. And then what happens if an intervention isn't working? That's a great question to ask. And that answer is going to vary by child and school and intervention. But some things to look at if the intervention isn't working. Is the intervention being given consistently? Right. So if a student is receiving an intervention, whether it's tier 2 or tier 3 interventions, which is supplemental intensive, they should be receiving that intervention from the same person every single time. They should be getting progress monitored consistently, typically, hopefully by the same person each time. So is the environment, the classroom environment, can the child concentrate in the classroom as they're getting their intervention? So because this intervention is not giving during core instruction time, right? So is the child being monitored while they're receiving their interventions? How is the child being supported when they're doing the interventions? So those are things that you can ask, and they have to look at all of those areas, which is environment, the curriculum, and the instruction, to before it can be decided if the intervention isn't working. Sometimes if the intervention is not working, if a child is on tier 2, then they will be moved up to tier 3 to intensify that intervention, which means they may get the intervention more frequently and for longer in a week. Also, it may look at a change in intervention. This particular intervention is not quite meeting the area of need that was identified. So they may change the intervention and their child may be placed on a different intervention for the area of need is identified. And in some instances, if the intervention or the child is not responding to intervention, they may be referred for EC evaluation. So what are some at home supports? So currently, one of the things you can use at home is iReady. So iReady is an online program for reading and or mathematics that will help your students, teachers determine your child's opportunities for growth, personalize their learning, and monitor progress throughout the school year. The district uses iReady as the universal screener for math in grades K-8 and reading for grades 4 through 8. The iReady Diagnostic or Universal Screener is an adaptive assessment that adjusts its questions to suit your student's instructional priorities. Each item a student sees is individualized based on their answer on the previous question. For example, a series of correct answers will result in a slightly harder questions, while a series of incorrect answers will yield slightly easier questions. The universal screener is given 3 times per year at the beginning of the year, September to mid-October, at the middle of the year, January to mid-February, and at the end of the year in April. The universal screener helps to identify students who may need additional support to meet their learning goals. This process helps educators to identify students at risk. Universal screening can help educators identify students at risk of poor learning outcomes. Universal screening can help educators monitor whether students are growing at needed rates. It also can evaluate core instruction. Universal screening can help educators match students with curricular or interventions designed to meet their individual needs. And universal screening can help educators get the data they need to begin early intervention. So for our iReady universal screener, you as a parent can access reports. So letters should have went home in October about how your child did on the universal screener for iReady in reading and math. For our case 3 students, you just received it for math only, and you should have received a letter for Dibbles for K2. You can access this digitally as well by using this district code I have on the screen. Your students will need to log on using the CMS Launchpad to be able to go to that screen to access the reports, and you can access it using this code. So here you have how will families access the reports. Again, it's on the student dashboard. So you will go, for us, you won't have to use the student's iReady Connect username and password. You will just log on to CMS Launchpad and go to the iReady icon. Your student will know what that is. You will put in the district code, and families will be able to review. For families, the reports will be in English or Spanish for reading and math. And so that directions are there. Also reach out to your child's school, because information and support on how to access, they can give that to you as well. So another at-home support is that you can use for iReady is iReady personalized instruction. So iReady personalized instruction provides students with lessons based on their individual skill level and opportunities for improvement. So your student can learn at a pace that's just right for them. These lessons are fun and interactive to keep your student engaged as they learn. So you can reach out to your student's teacher about accessing iReady from home. So it is available for all students in grades K through 8. And when your student logs on to iReady, they're going to see something that says My Path, and that's where they will go to access their personalized instruction. And that is based off the universal screener. And students in K3 also did the diagnostics so they can get a My Path for reading as well. So all students in K8 will have a My Path for universal screening for reading and for math in iReady, and it's something they can access at home. So we have some resources that we want to tell you about. We have our 24-25 MTSS print brochure. We have it currently in English and in Spanish, and we have others that will be loaded to this folder in other languages as well. If you need a specific language, just reach out to your child's school and they will notify our team, and we'll definitely upload it for you. We also have North Carolina Public Schools has information about integrated systems within the MTSS framework. That is great information for you as a parent. So when you hear the word MTSS, just remember it's not just for students receiving tier 2 or tier 3 interventions. It's for all students, and it's not a process, it is a framework. And so the MTSS framework, again, is everything we do in school. CMS has some support as well around the MTSS framework. And then we have some board policies as what type of support students should be receiving within the MTSS framework. So we have our Q&A, not Q&A, we have our feedback form again. That's going to be dropped in the Q&A session. In the Q&A session, I believe it was dropped earlier. And then now we're going to open and answer some questions that you all may have.
One question that we have in our Q&A is, does the classroom teacher or parent initiate the MTSS intervention request?
It could be both. So if you feel like your student needs additional support beyond the core, you can request that your child has their data reviewed, and you can request that your child has intervention support. So you, as a parent, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can request a meeting as well to discuss your child's academic data or behavior data and ask what supports are you providing for my child beyond the differentiated core.
Would the classroom teacher be the first point of contact for that request?
Yes, contact the classroom teacher.
Another question we have is, you mentioned Dreambox for elementary and also Khan Academy as one of the resources. Please let me know if Khan Academy is accessible for Horizon students in an elementary school.
So, Khan Academy is not an intervention. That's a good question. I can write that down. Khan Academy is not an intervention for elementary. The only intervention for math for elementary is Dreambox. And of course, while iReady isn't an intervention for Dreambox, they do have access to the MyPath. And if MyPath shows up, they have access to it. So if they are on grade level or even or above grade level, because they're in elementary, they should be able to access the iReady portion. But for Khan Academy is a free resource that you can use at home for your student. So it's no district support there as far as a district login for Khan Academy. If you need support around how to use it at home, you can reach out to your child's school. But basically, if you go on Khan Academy, you can choose the area you want your child to work in, the grade level, and the supports are there for them. So it's not necessarily something that you have to go through the school and use. But we do use it as an intervention support for our secondary math students.
Those are all the questions we have in the chat.
Do you all else have any other questions? So I do just want to reiterate the being able to use iReady at home. I think it's going to be it is a great resource that we have at the district. It provides you with data for your students and support as well. And so please use that. You have access to it and it's provided by the district. If you need support with logging on to from home onto CMS Launchpad, please reach out to your child's teacher. Also, again, just want to reiterate, you should be receiving a letter if your child is receiving supplemental, which is tier 2, or intensive, which is tier 3 interventions. You should be receiving a letter from the school, and it should not be pulling them out of core instruction. So if your child comes home and says, doing our ELA time today, I got pulled to go do something else and I'm missing class, they should not be missing core instruction to receive interventions.
We do have a new question in the chat.
Okay.
I have a question on the data review requirements for initiation of the MTSS request.
So as stated earlier, and let me see if I can go back to that slide so I can show you. So when a student is typically brought up before a team is possibly needing support around MTSS intervention, needing support for academic, let's say we're talking about academic interventions. A team must review multiple data points. So you have your universal screener data, you have your classroom data, which is your formal and informal assessments. It could be exit tickets. In the math curriculum, they call them cool downs. It could be your unit assessments. They also have mid-unit assessments, end-of-unit assessments. We have quarterly benchmarks in CMS. So multiple data sources, and also including behavior and attendance. So if a student is not coming to school, academic interventions aren't going to necessarily help them increase because they haven't gotten access to core. So a team actually sits down and reviews the data and decide, okay, based on classroom data, based on how this child is progressing, based on behavior data and attendance data, yes, this child's a good candidate to receive tier 2 and tier 3 support because they're getting their access to core instruction. We've looked at core instruction, the classroom environment, that they're getting differentiated support within the core instruction. They're getting their small group support within the core instruction. And now the student needs additional support. So having that data review really helps to look at, helps teams to problem solve to make sure that it's not something at core or behavior or attendance concern that's keeping the child from accessing academic on grade level instruction. With that being said, as a parent, because you are the parent, you can request the data review and you can request that your child has be put on interventions as well. And they can put your child on interventions and monitor to see if the interventions, how they're progressing, are they meeting their goals as well. Does that answer your question?
There was a follow-up to that question saying, are there a certain amount of data points that are required to access the need for MTSS interventions?
Well, we already finished for first quarter. So the data that you have for first quarter would be enough data. So we're talking about, you could even request the beginning of the school year. We go off historical data. You know, our team is a firm believer, yes, based off historical data, a student can start interventions at the beginning of the school year. But we also look at a new school year as a reset, and a child can come in, have a great opportunity to access that core instruction and turn around those grades and not have the same grades or interaction they had the previous school year. But first quarter is a great opportunity to look at data. So no, you don't need a certain number of data points to request MTSS interventions. As a parent, you can ask those questions about how is my child being supported with core instruction? What are we doing about how are you supporting my child around some of the skill gaps they have, and request, I want my child to be supported academically in math or academically in reading because I noticed those skills gaps in the grades. They're not progressing on grade level instruction within their grades. Now, what I'm talking about is specifically for kids who don't have an IEP in that area. So for when we're talking about MTSS interventions, and I didn't say this earlier, MTSS academic interventions specifically, if they have an IEP in reading, say, comprehension, then their need is already getting met through that specifically designed instruction. So we're talking about core kids who don't have an IEP in an area already, that they can receive those academic interventions. So yes, if they have an IEP in math, they can receive academic interventions in reading, and vice versa. If they have an IEP in reading, they can receive academic interventions in math. Give me a thumbs up if you're understanding what I'm saying. I don't want to confuse anyone.
Is there a email address that families should follow up with more personalized questions related to the data points for their students?
Typically reach out to your child's school, so the teacher. And when you say data points, you can request like, hey, I want to sit down and talk about the data for my students and review some data to see, will my child, I want my child to receive tier 2 interventions, academic interventions.
Is MTSS only for K-8 students?
So MTSS is everything we do in school. But it's, as far as interventions, high school students can receive interventions, academic interventions. They're typically in the 9th grade. Some of them are in the 10th grade. There's high school, the procedure for academic interventions is a little different for high school than it is for K-8 students. For high school, it's mostly around, are they in those foundation courses, like foundations of literacy, foundations of math 1? Are they at risk? Are they repeating a course? So they have to follow through with some of those guidelines for academic interventions in math. I mean, in high school, not just math, but in reading and math.
Thank you. About how many parent-teacher conferences are held in a school year for these conversations?
Ooh, that just depends on the school. I know CMS has some standard parent-teacher conferences around quarterly report cards. Typically, if a student is let's talk about a intensive student. Typically, if a student is put on intensive interventions, whether it's academics, behavior, social emotional, you will have in a intensive meeting before intervention start to discuss the data, discuss why the team has decided the student needs this intensive intervention, and to get your permission to begin interventions. Then about typically an intervention can last at a minimum 10 weeks or the entire school year, just depending on what the goal is and how long it'll take to get to the goal. But typically, and maybe the 5 week, 6 week mark, or even the 10 week mark, you're going to have a review meeting to discuss what's happening with your child's intervention, the progress monitoring data, to look at other data points as well. When we say we triangulate data, you'll be looking at multiple data points during this meeting to see how your child's progression and decide if the team is going to decide, okay, with the parent present, because you are a part of that intensive team as well, do we need to step the child back? Do we need to change the intervention? Do we need to keep going? Do we need to make a referral to EC? So that depends on the child and what's happening with that particular intervention. For supplemental interventions, again, a parent meeting is not required. But if you receive a letter saying your child's receiving supplemental interventions, you as the parent can request a meeting to look at the data points, to talk about where your child is, what is the progress monitoring data. So that would depend on the intervention in the child. But to answer your specific question about parent conferences, we have scheduled parent conferences throughout the school year based on like report cards. And in some schools they use that time to talk about academic interventions as well during those parent conferences time. So it's about 3 per school year. It's at the end of each quarter.
Can you share more about what Easy CBM Lite is?
So Easy CBM Lite is what we're using currently to progress monitor students that are on academic interventions for grades 4 through 9. So if they're receiving reading interventions, math interventions for really grades 4 through high school, they will get progress monitored. And when we say progress monitored, a student that's receiving supplemental interventions in reading will get progress monitored once every 4 weeks. When reading and math once every 4 weeks. And the reason is for once every 4 weeks is that you have to give time for instruction to happen and for kids to actually gain the skills that they're learning in those interventions so you can see the progress happening. For intensive interventions, using Easy CBM Lite for grades 4 through 8, they are getting in progress monitored about every 2 weeks. And so again, it's more frequently because the intervention is more intense. But yes, that's what Easy CBM Lite. Your school should be able to print out a report to show you where your students are, if they're meeting their goal as well. We use a platform, it's not public facing, it's only district facing, called Branching Minds, to house our intervention plans. And if your student is receiving an intervention plan and they're getting progress monitored and their interventions are being done with fidelity, the school should be able to print out an intervention plan to give you so you can see all that data.
Thank you. Can you share more about if MTSS provides non-academic services such as behavioral improvement, counseling, etc.?
So for non-behavior services, for non-academic, so yes, within our MTSS framework, we have academics, behavior, SEL. So some of the interventions for behavior and SEL, again, I had mentioned earlier that most of our interventions for behavior required parents' permission. So we have check and check out, which is a tier 2 um, intervention, which does not require parent permission. But then we have our other ones that were maybe cognitive behavioral counseling, social stories, skills streaming, which helps with skills. Why try? Those are different behavioral type of interventions that really deal with the mindset of the child and get into some of those pro-social behaviors that you want students to um, provide or display while they're at school.
Thank you. Those are all the questions in the Q&A at this time.
Those are actually very good questions. Very good questions. Again, reach out to your school, ask those questions. You are the biggest advocate for your child. And then don't forget to provide the share your feedback, and your Family Academy link is also in the Q&A. The link, the bit.ly to the presentation today is also in the Q&A.
Thank you for your time today, families. This session will be posted on the Family Academy on demand. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are here to support you. Have a wonderful day.